Discover how one brave waitress confronted a billionaire CEO and transformed the office forever. The bell above the diner door jingled, announcing the arrival of Richard Montgomery. His presence, sharp and imposing, cast a suffocating shadow over the tiny establishment, where Emma poured her heart into every cup of coffee and smile she shared with patrons. She had been juggling multiple jobs, supporting her retired mother and younger brother, and she wore the weight of their struggles like armor. Yet as Richard swept aside the elderly manager, Maria, dismissing her years of dedication with a wave of his hand, the armor started to crack. Emma's insides twisted. The certainty she had relied on, the lessons of honesty and resilience taught by her mother, now felt like a heavy burden in the wake of such blatant disrespect. She could feel the stares of her coworkers, the quiet unease spreading like wildfire through the diner. Did she stay silent, shield her job and comply, or confront the injustice in front of her? The air thickened, an almost physical pressure bearing down on her will. "Excuse me, sir," Emma found herself saying, her voice steady but laced with adrenaline. The hairs on her neck prickled as the surrounding tables quieted and shifted restlessly. That's no way to treat someone who has dedicated their life to this place. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her, managing to suppress the instinct to turn heel and retreat. How absurd that a waitress, merely a cog in the wheel of his affluent world, would dare to challenge him. The undeniable smirk on his face ignited something deep within her. Was it courage, or was it reckless desperation? Richard's laughter rang hollow in her ears. "And you are?" he shot back casually, clearly amused by the notion that she could confront someone of his stature. Yet as his scorn lingered in the air, a fire ignited within her. This was about more than her job. It was about her principles. Every ounce of her upbringing wrestled within her, wrestling with the dichotomy of wanting to make a difference and being fearful of the consequences. As she returned to the service counter, each order felt heavier than the last, the simple act of pouring coffee suddenly imbued with urgent significance. Emma's heart raced, her mind bombarded by conflicting emotions. She felt alive with purpose, yet the potential cost of confrontation loomed ominous in the background. How could she rally her coworkers to stand with her when they hesitated, afraid of backlash? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Every late night spent drafting proposals and gathering stories wore on her resolve. Slowly but surely, Emma's hope turned into determination, a rallying cry for authenticity born from the deepest parts of her struggle. Yet, with news of her ambitions reaching Richard, he smirked at her little crusade, convinced that the ordinary could never threaten his empire. But she thrived on his underestimation, channeling her anger into actionable plans. Just as Emma prepared to confront the executives, a chilling message arrived, a warning tinged with menace. You have no idea who you're dealing with. In that moment, her anthology of fears crystallized. The stakes had never felt higher. Standing on the precipice of this battle, she grappled with whether she could indeed change anything at all. The diner doors swung open again, the weight of all her encounters colliding at that moment, as she braced for the fight ahead. Emma faced not just Richard, but a lifetime of fearlessness wrapped in an emblem of her conviction. The diner's atmosphere felt electric as Emma stood there, hands trembling ever so slightly at her sides. She could hear the muted clatter of dishes and the murmured conversations of customers, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. The message had rattled her, raising the specter of uncertainty. Was she truly prepared to challenge someone like Richard Montgomery, a titan in the corporate arena? With the threat looming over her, Emma took a deep breath, trying to quell the fear twisting in her stomach. She recalled her mother's words, "Strength lies not only in muscle, but in moral conviction." It was a mantra that had guided her since childhood, echoing louder now. Instead of retreating to her usual routine, she envisioned how to harness that inner strength and rally her coworkers. For too long, they had accepted the status quo, cowering in front of the powerful. It was time for transformation, and Emma could be the catalyst. She began by reaching out to her fellow waitstaff during breaks, cautiously testing the waters regarding her plan. "We need to do something," she said one afternoon, her tone unwavering. "What Richard did to Maria is unacceptable, and it sets a standard for how he thinks he can treat us." The air was thick with hesitation. Some averted their gazes, while others exchanged nervous glances. "It's easier to just keep our heads down," whispered Jane, who had been in the diner for over a decade. Easier for who? Emma pressed. It might be easier now, but what future are we crafting? Those who haven't spoken up before will just keep experiencing the same treatment. We deserve respect. A flicker of resolve sparked in a few eyes, but fear still reigned supreme among them. Emma could feel the gravity of the moment. She realized the fight was as much internal as it was external.
Over the next few days, she continued her gentle prodding, framing her passion as a shared need for dignity instead of a personal vendetta. As the whispers gained momentum, she decided to call a meeting in private, a gathering away from the watchful eyes of management. The night they convened at an old park bench under the flickering streetlight, resigned smiles began to shift into something more resolute. Emma laid out her vision. "We can plan our meeting with the executives together," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. "We make it known that we refuse to accept disrespect. If we act as a united front, they can't ignore us." Some lingered on the edge of commitment. What made this situation more daunting was the specter of Richard's warnings still looming like a thundercloud in her mind. There was no telling how far he would go to quash any dissent. Nevertheless, she also saw a glimmer of enthusiasm, a hope igniting in their collective consciousness. As discussions flourished, Emma's partners became more engaged, uncovering their own truths, stories of mistreatment that resonated with her. Each revelation fortified Emma's determination. This wasn't just about her fight anymore. Every voice counted. Fueled by this camaraderie, Emma realized she was uncovering talents within herself, leadership, persuasion, and above all, resilience in the face of adversity. Once the meeting was set, a sense of purpose surged through her. With each plan put into practice, Emma could almost hear Richard's laughter turning to astonishment. She envisioned shaking the foundations of his empire, turning the tides of power back towards those who truly deserved it. But as the time drew near, doubt crept in again. What if they succeeded? What would Richard do in retaliation? The situation felt charged with the weight of their decision, carrying consequences far beyond any diner walls. The looming question of whether she could withstand the storm yet to come plagued her. The moment was approaching as she stared at her reflection in the diner's front window, seeing a woman transformed, yet still terrified. Little did Emma know that Richard was already one step ahead, watching her every move from the shadowy corners of his empire. The game was set, and as she took her final breath, the reality of the deluge that awaited her drummed steadily in her heart. What would it take for her to truly stand firm, even against an unstoppable force? Emma could hardly believe the clock on the kitchen wall had advanced, while her thoughts spiraled in disarray. Each tick echoed like a countdown, leading to an unavoidable confrontation, the stakes rising with every moment. She knew that every action now demanded precision. Self-doubt had no place on the eve of such a monumental step. The night before their planned meeting with the executives loomed heavy with uncertainty. As she sliced vegetables for the next day's specials, she pondered the weight of her mission.
It was no longer simply about standing up for Maria. It was about dismantling the unwarranted authority Richard wielded over their lives. Amid her chaotic thoughts, she noticed the knife glinting under the fluorescent lights. The reflection revealed not just her image, but also a woman who was beginning to understand the power that resided within her. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was the subtleties of conviction and the courage to rise against the tide. With resolve ignited, she could almost hear her mother's voice again. Choose the moment, and let that moment choose you. Fueled by clarity, Emma sketched a few notes, reminders of why she had taken up this cause. Each bullet pointed to the testimonies shared, the tear-streaked faces that recounted their stories. This wasn't just an abstract fight. It was one against daily indignities. The challenge was encompassing and necessary. The moment of truth demanded the most of her. That evening, she gathered her co-workers once more, this time in the diner's back room, where the raucous noise from the patrons faded into a quiet urgency. Emma's heart raced as she saw them trickle in one by one, faces reflecting a combination of fear and determination. She could feel their hesitations, the weight of their past experiences settling like shadows on their shoulders. "Tomorrow, we will present our case," she began, voice steady but filled with urgency. "Each of us has the right to be treated with decency. We cannot let fear silence us." A tense silence hung in the air, her words swirling around them, testing their fortitude. "Emma, "What if Richard dismisses us outright?" Jane asked, the sharpness of her concern cutting through the tension. "What if we're wasting our time?" "Then we stand firm," Emma said, the conviction in her voice surprising even herself. "Each dismissal is a chance for us to stand stronger together. If he tries to brush us aside, it only proves we are right to demand change." With each reassurance, she could see flickers of courage ignite in her colleagues. Emma's words built a scaffolding for their collective courage, each phrase a rung leading them towards empowerment. It wasn't simply about winning. It was about the fight itself, the act of defiance against indifference, the resistance that so many had longed to express. As their more reluctant peers began to nod in agreement, a sense of palpable energy filled the room. Emma felt the rush of something new, a team, a movement. They challenged the ominous silence together, piece by piece, growing closer as allies. Yet even as adrenaline surged, a flicker of dread wormed its way into her heart. How would they sustain this newfound resolve in the face of potential retribution? They were employees, not battlers, yet here they were stepping in the line of fire. How could she be a beacon of strength when doubt sang its siren song within?
As she dismissed the meeting, a stirring remained. A mixture of hope and apprehension danced in her chest. Each individual had to confront what lay ahead personally, turning questions into motivators. Their journey would not merely test their courage, but would forge paths towards truths they had kept buried for too long. Tomorrow would mark a turning point, not just for them, but for Emma herself. Her heart raced, anticipation spiraling into a whirlwind of excitement and anxiety. What would the next chapter hold as they prepared to face Richard? Emma's mind churned, brimming with the possibilities of revelation or ruin. Yet, standing on the brink of action, she realized it was too late to turn back now. The moment had arrived, and they would have to meet Richard head-on. Would they leave as victors or scapegoats? The unknown lingered, each heartbeat building towards a crescendo that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed in the early morning, casting a sterile glow over everything. Emma arrived before the others, the stillness amplifying her anxious thoughts. The day felt electric, the weight of their impending confrontation pressing on her chest like a leaden weight. She didn't need to look in a mirror to know that her expression bore the marks of sleepless anticipation. The remnants of last night's determination flickered weakly, challenged by whispers of doubt. One by one, her colleagues trickled in, sharing nods of encouragement, while their eyes mirrored her uncertainty. Emma watched Jane, her steadfast ally, pacing near the coffee machine. It was a ritual of sorts. They each reflected the shared anxiety, the tightening coil of the day ahead. "Are you ready, Emma?" Jane finally asked, breaking the silence that had lingered uncomfortably. The question hung in the air. Ready? The true answer lay deeper. She felt a churn of bravery coiled with fear. "I think so. Ready to face him, but more ready for everything that comes after," Emma replied, her heart pounding with each word that emerged from her lips. As the clock edged towards the scheduled time, their small group grew, forming a collective submitting their fates to the whims of a man far removed from their daily lives. Each of them silently shared the stakes, and collectively they shifted towards the door leading to the executive office. Emma breathed deeply. The moment hadn't just arrived, it loomed, potent and undeniable. As they filed into the starkly designed executive office, she could feel the gravity of each step. The familiar scent of polished wood and expensive cologne settled around them, suffocating, but somehow also emboldening. Richard sat behind a massive desk that seemed to dwarf everything around him, his expression unreadable as he regarded them with palpable indifference. Emma's stomach twisted.
In the depths of his gaze was the assurance of power. Beneath it, an external facade forged from years of maneuvering through corporate landscapes. "Let's hear it," Richard commanded, leaning back in his chair as if to signal he had everything under control. Emma's heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth encapsulated in a span of seconds. Glancing around at her colleagues, she sensed the fleeting unity of courage fueling her resolve. They each held unspoken fears that had ballooned in the shadows before this day.
In that collective silence, a decision crystallized within her. Lee shuffled forward, his voice tight with anxiety. "We've come to discuss our working conditions. We believe changes are necessary." As he spoke, Emma felt a rush of adrenaline. They were taking the first step, finally voicing the struggles that had long festered. But was it enough? Richard cut in sharply, dismissing their concerns with a wave. "You're all replaceable. You think I'm going to change systems for a handful of complaints?" The impact of his words struck like thunder, reverberating in the very marrow of the group gathered before him. Emma's pulse raced, and panic threatened to slip through her carefully constructed facade. Anger swirled within, mingling with a growing realization of his underestimation. They might be just employees in his eyes, but today was about revealing their collective worth. "What you may not understand," Emma began, her voice steadier than she felt, "is that each story you dismiss represents a life. We're not just numbers. We're human beings with value. Dismissing us isn't an option." As her words landed with an undeniable weight, Emma recognized the stirring shift among her companions. Their eyes lit with a deeper understanding of her declaration, their confidence slowly building like a rising wave. A movement was beginning, not just in her voice, but within the collective spirit of every person in that room. Richard's brow furrowed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered through his carefully constructed demeanor. Emma could feel the power of their shared determination enveloping the room. Yet, even as adrenaline surged through her veins, the familiar tendrils of doubt began to seep back in. Was their courage enough? Would Richard retaliate against them for daring to speak? And then a haunting thought lurked. If they didn't press on, what consequence would their silence bear? The clock ticked, stretching out the moments into an unresolved tension that wrapped around them all. They had plunged into uncharted waters. Now there was no turning back. What would this encounter unleash? Would they break or rise? The moment was far from over, and Emma squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever was next. But as the stillness paused, an unsettling realization sank in. How deep would they have to fight to preserve their dignity in a world that hardly acknowledged them? The uncertainty loomed.
Emma's words echoed in the room, forming an invisible barrier between her and Richard, who now sat with a cloud of indignation darkening his features. Silence reigned, thick and heavy. Each tick of the clock sliced through the tension, forcing Emma to maintain eye contact, searching for cracks in Richard's facade, testing his resolve. "Human beings?" Richard scoffed, a disbelieving smirk curling his lips. "Do you really believe I'll be swayed by tales of human existence? In this industry, stories don't cut deals. Numbers do." Biting back the urge to lose herself in frustration, Emma refocused her thoughts. She couldn't afford to waver. Their cause was just, rooted in authenticity and an undeniable need for change. She reminded herself of the countless late nights and the weight of shared burdens, the laughter that had echoed through the break room, and the dreams each of them harbored beyond the confines of their cubicles. Numbers represent lives, Richard. Each one of us brings unique strengths to this company, strengths that you overlook, she asserted, feeling the ember of determination rekindle within her. We can help this company thrive, but only if our voices are acknowledged. A tense pause hung in the air. She noticed Jane shifting behind her, and Lee flicking his gaze between Emma and Richard, gauging the atmosphere. Together they were a fragile coalition, but within each of them lay a shared understanding. They were tired of being an afterthought. Richard straightened, the menace in his demeanor reasserting itself. "You honestly expect me to change policies because of a handful of grievances? The bottom line is what matters. Without it, there is no company." With those words, Emma felt the ground beneath her shift. Was this the fight they were facing, an immovable wall of corporate indifference? She felt raw vulnerability surfacing, mingled with the fierce need to challenge the status quo. But what if this was the moment where change could happen? Could they turn Richard's disdain into an opportunity? Her mind raced through the possibilities. What if they focused on the tangible solutions her colleagues could offer? Perhaps they didn't need to convince him of their worth, but instead illustrate how recognizing it could lead to greater productivity and profit. "Then let's speak numbers," Emma pressed on, a fresh resolve igniting within her. "We have metrics showing that improved morale leads to better performance. If you invest in your employees, it results in higher retention rates and productivity. This isn't just about personal stories. It's about maximizing potential." Richard's eyes flickered, the slightest hint of curiosity breaking through his disinterest. Emma seized the moment. Adjusting her posture, she leaned slightly forward, her heart pounding as she positioned herself not just as an employee, but as an advocate. "We can collaborate to develop a safer and more productive working environment."
Let us present data and solutions that matter to you, but we need to be heard first, she articulated clearly, urgency lacing her words. His silence was palpable, and Emma dared to hope. She felt adrenaline dancing in her veins, propelling her forward into uncharted territory, where personal growth met professional ambition. This was a turning point, testing her capabilities far beyond what she felt prepared for moments ago. With a subtle shift in the atmosphere, Lisa's voice broke through the fray, adding her support. Slowly, others followed suit, urgency surging in their collective voices. They began recommending specific measures and strategies as if they were drafting a blueprint for a new future that the company couldn't afford to ignore. Yet even as courage surged, Emma sensed the fragility of their movement. Richard's expression hadn't completely transformed. Shadows still lurked in his gaze. The conflict was not merely verbal, it was primal, a fight for validation against someone committed to wielding power over them. Could their burgeoning confidence withstand the looming threat of dismissal? In hearing their voices, would Richard unravel or double down on his authority? Emma felt a complex mix of determination and fear. The stakes had risen, and now the room crackled with possibility and peril. Could they capitalize on this moment, or would their hard-won progress crumble beneath the weight of Richard's scorn? As Emma's heart thundered with questions, the air around them thickened, and she braced for the impending shift that awaited, teetering on the precipice of change. Emma inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the present as she prepared for the unfolding drama that teetered around Richard. Realizing that their meeting could pivot on a mere moment, she seized the opportunity to take control of the narrative. Richard, if you truly believe in maximizing the company's potential, then investing in people is not optional, it's essential, she declared, her voice steady, cutting through the tension with a newfound clarity. Richard leaned back, arms crossed defiantly, clearly unmoved, but also momentarily silent, as if considering Emma's proposition. It was then she noticed a brief flicker of something in his eyes, a crack in the armor of his corporate stoicism. Did he feel the pressure? Was her stance beginning to seep through the impenetrable barriers he had constructed? Emma pressed forward, driven by a surge of adrenaline and the support from her coworkers filling the room. We can create a measurable proposal. Let us develop an initiative that addresses employee concerns and transforms our culture. The potential return on investment is significant, not only in numbers, but in morale and loyalty. In that moment, Emma felt a profound shift within herself, as though each word crystallized her purpose, a transformative moment embodying her belief that leadership was not about authority, but about empowerment.
She was no longer merely a waitress behind the counter. She was a catalyst for change, steering the very ship she once felt sidelined from. The room resonated with murmurs of agreement, her colleagues visibly rallying around her. Jane spoke up next, detailing success stories from other companies where investment in employee wellness had led directly to increased profits. Then Lee chimed in with specific figures, drawing from their data. Each voice became a vital thread in the tapestry of their argument, lifting Emma's own resolve to new heights. Yet, as Richard remained reticent, Emma's mind flickered to darker thoughts. What if their efforts fell flat? What if Richard's insistence on rigid metrics overshadowed their passionate pleas? Doubt surged like a shadow creeping into her conviction. She fought against it, reminding herself of the stakes, not just her personal ambition, but the collective morale of an entire workforce. Richard, Emma continued, her tone shifting to a more urgent whisper. Acknowledging our contributions doesn't diminish your authority. Instead, it enhances it. Leaders who uplift their teams foster loyalty and innovation. You have an opportunity here to redefine your image. Richard finally leaned forward, fingers steepled under his chin, analyzing her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. Emma's heart raced. She felt exposed, yet emboldened by the exposure. What's your plan? His voice was sharper now, as if the thought of genuine discussion ignited a yearning within him. I propose we organize a stakeholders meeting to present our findings, Emma replied quickly, sensing momentum as her vision crystallized into tangible action. This could be a pilot program to test the waters, a chance for you to showcase leadership that prioritizes not just the bottom line, but the people driving that success. As Richard considered her, the energy shifted again. There was something brewing beneath his facade. She could feel it thrumming through the air. Will you do it? He asked slowly,
skepticism lacing his tone. Yes, she affirmed, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest. Together, we'll create a path forward that benefits us all. It's time to change the narrative, Richard. But as she witnessed Richard's contemplative stare, doubts flashed through Emma's mind like an unpredictable storm. Was she naive to believe he would embrace this shift? As she assessed his reaction, anxiety clawed at the corners of her resolve. What if this was the moment that made or broke their efforts? The balance was precarious, standing between their fragile optimism and Richard's relentless authority. In that charged silence, Emma braced herself for the next words that could either seal their fate or ignite a revolution within the company. Would she finally get the recognition that had long eluded her, or would Richard extinguish their embers of hope in a moment's careless dismissal?
The air crackled with expectation, and Emma's spirit hung in the balance as she prepared for the consequential response that would define her journey. The weight of silence stretched between Emma and Richard, an electrical tension that could either spark a movement or electrocute their hopes. She inhaled deeply, focusing on the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat, a steady pulse that reminded her of the importance of this moment. This was no longer just about proposals and meetings. It was about her evolution from a passive player to a bold leader. "What are we waiting for?" Richard finally said, a hint of frustration breaking through his previous stoicism. "If this is so important, why haven't you prepared something already? Paint me the picture, Emma." The challenge ignited her further. "I can gather the data and prepare a presentation, Richard, but we need to ensure it's a collective effort. The employees need to feel a part of this initiative." His brow furrowed, the room tense with the air of unspoken stakes. Was he willing to cede some control to embrace a shared vision? Emma sensed his hesitation, but also saw a flicker of curiosity. If Richard could be swayed, she could usher in genuine change. "Presenting a case without everyone's input would weaken our argument," she continued, carefully selecting her words. "We need testimonials, real experiences. I can reach out to several departments and gather feedback. Employees want to feel heard. Their voices will lend authenticity to our proposal." Richard nodded slowly, his expression inscrutable. Emma felt the rush of adrenaline, but it was punctuated with anxiety. Would he truly lean into this idea? "Fine," he conceded after what felt like an eternity. "You have 3 days. Organize a meeting, gather what you need, and come back to me. But I expect results, not just lip service. I want clear data and projected outcomes." As Emma walked out of the meeting, a swell of triumph mingled with a torrent of anxiety. The clock was ticking, 3 days to turn an abstract idea into a concrete proposal that could potentially alter the company's trajectory. The first step was crucial. She focused on outlining a plan, specific actions she could take to not only gather data, but engage employees meaningfully. Her mind raced, vividly imagining the relief on the faces of her coworkers when they realized they were not just cogs in a machine, but integral players in a shared vision. Uncertain of where to start, Emma quickly grabbed her notebook and headed to the break room, a familiar sanctuary of laughter and camaraderie. With a few casual touches of inspiration, she approached Lee first, asking about his thoughts on employee wellness and the data they already had. "I think people would really respond to surveys," Lee suggested, enthusiasm lighting his eyes. "We could gauge interest in workshops and team-building exercises. The last ones we had were a hit." Encouraged by Lee's insights, Emma set about drafting a list of questions for a survey, eager to involve as many employees as possible. It wasn't just gathering data, it was also about building a coalition of support. That evening, exhaustion crept into her bones as she compiled feedback and brainstormed suggestions from her colleagues. The profound fatigue could have easily diluted her ambition, but she felt invigorated. Each little contribution was like fuel, propelling her toward their common goal. Yet, lurking beneath the surface was a subconscious doubt. What if Richard dismissed her proposal, despite the support she'd gathered? What if he threw her plans back in her face, a sharp rebuttal stinging her fervor? No, she shook her head, refusing to yield to fear. This was her moment to stand tall on the battleground of corporate culture. As the night deepened, Emma found herself caught between excitement and fear, fueled by dreams of what might blossom if she succeeded. On the verge of an important crossroads, the stakes had never felt so high. Just as doubts began to overshadow her fervor, she resolved to push through. As she closed her eyes that night, thoughts of the impending meeting filled her mind. Would the audacity she had found in herself lead to the change she so desperately wanted? The question loomed large, reflecting her struggle to turn her dreams into reality. The next day would reveal whether she could truly spark a shift, or if her journey would lead to another disheartening defeat.
The morning light crept through the office blinds, illuminating papers strewn across Emma's desk. She had scarcely slept, her mind racing with scenarios. Each presentation she envisioned was laced with the potential fallout of failure. Her pulse quickened. Today was not just another day. It was the day she must solidify her transformation into a leader. In the quiet early hours, she composed herself. She meticulously reviewed her list of survey questions, adjusting wording to ensure clarity and engagement. Each query was a step toward revealing the true desires of her colleagues, not just about wellness programs, but about a systemic change in the workplace that honored and valued every voice. As the clock inched toward 9, the rest of the office began to fill with life, chatter becoming a comforting backdrop to her determination. She approached several employees throughout the morning, encouraging them to share their thoughts. Noah from HR suggested incorporating feedback on work-life balance, while Tara from design emphasized the importance of creativity in employee programs. Every interaction felt like a building block in her growing confidence, reinforcing her belief in a shared vision. Yet, as she compiled these insights, lingering anxieties thrummed beneath the surface. What if Richard, in his rigid executive way, quashed their enthusiasm? What if he interpreted their suggestions as trivial?
Pushing those thoughts aside, Emma decided her next move was to confront her fears head-on. She scheduled a meeting with Richard, aptly titled Preliminary Insights and Strategy. This title, she hoped, would convey her intention to act rather than merely present. As she clicked send on the email, a rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins. Was she truly ready for this? Later that morning, Emma stood in front of a large whiteboard in the conference room, her nerves barely in check. As she began sketching out her framework for the meeting, essential statistics from her survey, actionable insights, and projected outcomes, she recalled Richard's earlier insistence on results. It drove her to refine her points, layering in clarity and compelling graphics. By the time Richard entered the room, Emma felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. He took his seat, arms crossed, and scrutinized her as if he was assessing her worth. Inside, Emma steadied her breathing, welcoming the uncertainty as an opportunity. "Good morning, Richard," she started, her voice firmer than she expected. "I appreciate you taking the time today. I've gathered significant feedback from our colleagues about enhancing employee wellness and engagement." His gaze didn't soften, but she pressed on. She shared the curated insights, how many wanted wellness workshops, the creative suggestions for social events, and the urgent need for a culture shift. With each passing moment, she noticed his grip on the conference table loosen. "Your proposal relies heavily on employee input," he responded, skepticism drifting into curiosity. "Why should we pivot our strategy based on hearsay?" Emma paused, firmly wrestling with his challenge. "Because these are not just voices in the background, they're key players in our success. The better they feel supported, the more productivity and creativity we'll see. I believe we can elevate our workplace culture together." Watching his expression flicker, doubt mingled with interest. Emma leaned in, daring to probe deeper. What if we saw this not only as an employee initiative, but as a paradigm shift that could strengthen the whole organization? His eyes narrowed, a protective instinct emerging as he processed her words. The dialogue shifted as he asked about specific implementation plans, a transition she hadn't anticipated. Emma's heart pounded with exhilaration. This was it, the moment when she took ownership, making this collaborative initiative her own. By the end of the discussion, Richard's defenses had begun to lower, a spark of intrigue igniting. She could see he was contemplating the potential of her proposal, but there was still something pivotal hanging in the air, an unresolved tension. As they wrapped up, Richard nodded, less resolute than when the meeting began. "Let's explore these insights further. I want a more detailed plan by the end of the week." Emma smiled subtly, fighting the urge to celebrate prematurely.
Richard's reluctant interest was a significant step forward, yet it left her longing for the validation she still craved. After they parted, her mind reeled with possibilities, but shadows of doubt lurked once more. Would her efforts truly lead to a sustainable shift, or would this all crumble under the weight of corporate inertia? As she gathered her materials, she felt something new, a determination igniting within her. It was her chance to cultivate not just a workspace, but a culture where innovation thrived. Yet there remained an ominous, unavoidable question. Could she withstand the fallout of potential failure, should this not go as planned? The weight of her ambition was both thrilling and consuming. Emma knew she needed to not only solidify her proposal, but also prepare for the repercussions of challenging a powerful executive's mindset. The next steps would shape not just her career, but the entire workplace atmosphere moving forward. The moment of truth stood at the threshold, daring her to take the leap toward the unknown.
The next morning, Emma sat at her desk, surrounded by the familiar chaos of papers and files, but something monumental had shifted overnight. The sense of urgency that had squeezed her chest was now laced with a resolve she never truly knew she possessed. She had garnered Richard's interest, albeit cautiously, and that was a profound victory in itself. Still, doubt nipped at her heels like an annoying pest. Could she actually create the change she envisioned, or was she merely entertaining a fleeting daydream? As the clock struck 10, Emma took a deep breath and opened her laptop, opening a blank document titled Detailed Proposal for Wellness Initiative. Her fingers hovered above the keys, then began to tap with purpose. Each word felt like a brushstroke on a canvas, bringing her vision closer to life. The more detail she added, graphics illustrating productivity metrics, timelines for implementation, and strategies to mitigate potential objections, the more confident she found. Just then her phone buzzed. It was Tara, her ally from design, inviting her for lunch. Emma hesitated. She wanted to stay focused, but knew Tara's creative energy could fuel her own. Grabbing her notebook, she decided a breather wouldn't hurt. At the cafe, Tara animatedly discussed new design trends, but Emma's mind wandered to the proposal. "I need your insight, Tara," she interjected after a moment of silence. "I'm drafting the wellness initiative, but I'm struggling with how to make it visually compelling. Richard's going to want to see something tangible, something that grabs him." Tara leaned in, her eyes brightening. "You need to tell a story. You want to present not just facts, but an emotional connection to what this initiative could mean for everyone. Show how our colleagues will thrive. Use photos of actual employees engaging in wellness activities." Emma felt a rush of excitement. "That's brilliant."
It has to resonate on a human level. She jotted down notes, their conversation intertwined with renewed energy. As they finished lunch, Emma felt revitalized and equipped with fresh ideas. Drawing on Tara's talent would enhance her proposal's appeal, making it feel less like a corporate pitch and more like a heartfelt invitation for change. Back in the office, Emma returned to her desk, energized. The definition of what leadership meant to her shifted, morphing into something deeply personal. It wasn't merely a position threaded with authority. It was about listening, gathering voices, and reflecting their desires back to them in a compelling way. She was served not just by the power of her position, but through genuine collaboration. Months of being overlooked melted away as she became acutely aware of the resilience arising from within. But as she delved deeper into crafting her proposal, an unwelcome thought slinked into her mind. What if Richard thought her ideas were frivolous? What if her efforts to engage employees were simply dismissed as unworkable? The weight of those thoughts was suffocating. Yet, rather than succumbing to fear, she decided to confront that very fear head-on. She would include a section within her proposal that addressed potential critiques and counter-arguments. She'd prepare a strategy for dissent, arming herself with data and insights that would buttress her passion-driven narrative. The weeks sped by, each day blending strategy sessions, feedback loops with Tara, and sleepless nights poring over charts and diagrams. The ticking countdown to her next meeting with Richard loomed ominously. The pressure was tangible, but Emma felt transformed, poised at the precipice of creating something meaningful. As she stepped into the conference room for their next meeting, she could feel the tension climb. All eyes were on her. Richard's seated silhouette seemed larger than life, a monolith representing authority and uncertainty. But within her flickered the embers of bravery ignited from her colleagues' voices, the very fabric of her proposal. "Let's explore this together," she said, a determined flint in her voice, as she unveiled her meticulously prepared presentation, filled with charts, images, and heartfelt stories. Little did she know that Richard was not her only audience. A silent ally watched intently at the back of the room, someone whose presence would alter the course of her journey in ways she could have never anticipated. The stakes were high. Emma realized she was not merely fighting for a program, she was battling to define her place in a world that often pushed her aside. Would she harness her newfound confidence to triumph, or crumble under the pressure of expectation? The outcome was uncertain, and the air sparkled with nascent possibilities. The moment of truth was about to unfold.
The conference room buzzed with anticipation as Emma stood at the front, feeling the weight of her colleagues' hopes resting heavily on her shoulders. The air was thick with uncertainty, but she had cultivated the resolve to face it head-on. This was her moment, a culmination of her journey from uncertainty to empowerment. As Emma clicked through her meticulously crafted presentation, vivid images of her coworkers smiling during wellness workshops flashed across the screen. She highlighted the correlation between employee satisfaction and productivity, showcasing data that illustrated the transformative power of investing in their well-being.
Each slide represented a story, a voice, a pledge to change the narrative that had long overshadowed their contributions. Richard listened intently, the skepticism etched on his face slowly giving way to intrigue. "You make some compelling points," he acknowledged finally, the sharpness in his tone dulled by a hint of curiosity. "But can you actually implement these ideas without disturbing the fabric of our existing operations?" Emma felt the challenge pulse through her. "The key is to start small, Richard. We can launch a pilot program in one department, gather data, and then use that evidence to scale it across the company. The goal isn't just to solicit participation. It's about fostering so much engagement that the success speaks for itself." With every word that spilled from her lips, Emma could sense her confidence solidifying. She was no longer merely a waitress standing up for others. She had become an advocate, a strategist who understood the intrinsic value of her coworkers. Each nod of approval from her colleagues behind her fueled her determination further. To elevate the conversation, she invited Tara to share her input. Tara stood and explained how visuals could serve as a tool to tell their collective story. As she spoke passionately about creating an engaging atmosphere, Emma caught the shift in Richard's demeanor, the slightest lean forward, and attentive gaze that indicated he was genuinely considering their proposal. "All right then," he hesitated, crossing his arms thoughtfully. "Let's say I'm willing to entertain this idea. How would you measure success?" Emma's heart raced at the question. "We'll track employee feedback, productivity metrics, and retention rates. The more data-driven our approach, the more compelling our case for expansion will be." Richard glanced around the table, seemingly weighing attitudes. "You realize instituting change of this nature requires significant upfront investment and an indeterminate return." "Employing a steady breath," Emma responded. "Investing in employees isn't just charity, it's strategic business acumen. The return won't just be numerical, it will echo through the culture we create in this workplace. Empowered employees lead to innovation, which defines the longevity of a successful company."
The atmosphere shifted, and she felt a collective swell of support. Lee and others murmured their agreement, reaffirming the power of their shared resolve. Emma sensed that they were no longer just individuals feared by Richard. They represented a united front demanding respect. Richard leaned back, contemplating. "You'll need to present a detailed plan to the executives in a week. If they buy in, I'll give you the resources needed to mobilize this initiative." A rush of triumph surged through her. She had secured his tentative support, a breakthrough she had only dared to dream of. As she concluded her presentation, gratitude flooded her veins. Emma stood taller, the armor she had forged from years of struggle now shining brightly with renewed purpose. She had not only addressed a systemic issue, but transformed herself from an overlooked employee into a respected leader. The din of self-doubt began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of solid confidence. After the meeting, her colleagues surrounded her, their smiles radiating joy, pride, and a collective understanding that they had risen together. Emma basked in their appreciation, feeling the profound validation of her journey. Within a few days, the enthusiasm flowed into action. Emma and Tara collaborated on the detailed proposal for the executives, pouring in their combined effort and insights. As they drafted charts and narratives to showcase the initiative's potential impact, Emma couldn't ignore the personal growth she had achieved. Once shackled by fear, she now thrived on collaboration and leadership. When the day arrived for the presentation to the executives, Emma confidently articulated their vision. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, but the most gratifying moment was when Richard acknowledged her pivotal role in advocating for change. "I underestimated you," he confessed openly, a nod of respect exchanged between them. Emma left that meeting knowing she had accomplished what she once thought impossible. She had proven herself capable, facilitated actual change, and inspired her colleagues to believe in their worth. But more important than recognition were the internal shifts that rippled through her. Strengthened by her newfound confidence, Emma had become an essential part of the company, a connoisseur of empowerment and collaboration. She realized this was just the beginning. Her journey of growth had only just commenced. Emma returned to the diner that evening, where it all began, and as she poured a cup of coffee, she looked out the window, a panorama of hope and personal triumph stretching before her. She had transformed not just the workplace, but had redefined her identity, and every day from that moment onward, she would carry forth the light of empowerment she had sparked. You need to subscribe now if you want to be part of more powerful stories of transformation. This is the moment to show your support and be inspired by real-life journeys.
Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more incredible stories. Comment your thoughts and reactions about this conclusion. Your engagement means the world. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need inspiration and motivation in their lives. Let's spread the journey of overcoming together.